Head coach Mario Cristobal just revealed how much the Miami Hurricanes' offensive game plans change week to week.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On this Monday episode, and thankfully it's a Monday after a win. Hadn't had one of those in a few weeks. Bye week, Louisville lost, but here we are after a 42-7 win against Stanford. Phenomenal second half. First half we'd all like to forget, but phenomenal second half. Miami is favored big in their upcoming game against SMU. We'll talk about it. We will discuss the importance of Miami finding some additional playmakers for the stretch run. I think we saw signs of that in the Stanford game. Got to keep moving forward because we can't continue to rely on the same 3 or 4 offensive players. I think variety is going to come with more playmakers getting involved. But Mario Cristobal had a lot to say on Monday morning, his weekly radio spot with Joe Rose on 104.3 WQAM. Before we get to what Mario says about the offensive game planning and philosophy, an interesting note on what was said at halftime. I mean, you all remember how the Stanford game started. Miami gave up a 74-yard opening drive for the Cardinal and a touchdown. Miami gets the football, penalty on their opening drive, an unsuccessful 44-yard field goal try, and the offense looked bland and impotent, if I could use a word from Mark Jones on the broadcast, until the final offensive drive of the second quarter when Miami scored a touchdown, and then things were absolutely rolling in the second half. So, I mean, my suspicion was I thought Mario handed out cafecitos in the locker room during halftime because Miami had a completely different energy in the second half. A lot of those bland play calls that you call them out for were actually working because of the execution in the second half. Miami got a lot of juice from those Malachi Toney punt returns, which I thought really sparked the offense, and they had the sort of energy they didn't have in the first half of that game. And a couple of interceptions on defense, Wes Besaint and Xavier Lucas. Lucas, by the way, was Miami's highest graded player, according to Pro Football Focus. He had an awesome game. You can understand why Wisconsin tried to sue us over this young man because he's a great player. But as far as what Cristobal said to the team at halftime, he told them the truth. Just keep playing. It's a 4-quarter game. I don't want to see any anxiety, anybody hanging their head. It's football. Just keep working, fight your butt off, keep the momentum of the game. He said the issues the previous game showed up again in the first quarter. Slow start. It was really good resilience of our guys. We did a couple of different things. Anxiety is a great word to describe the way Miami played for most of the first half against Stanford, and really the way Miami played for just about that entire Louisville game. Because when the Hurricanes went down 14-0 to Louisville, you saw the body language change, you saw the anxiety increase, and then early in the Stanford game, and I said this on our Sunday recap show, Miami looked like a team that was playing with the full awareness of, if we lose another game, we're eliminated from the college football playoff. Margin for error is 0. They were playing like that. You can't play like that. You need to free yourself of that anxiety, which is the perfect word for it, what Cristobal used. And eventually, when Miami started making plays, they seemed to shed a lot of that anxiety. A player who was absent from the Stanford game, and thankfully, since it was Stanford, Miami was able to overcome the absence of Akeem Mesidor. But I think we all know with tougher games coming up, SMU this weekend should be considerably tougher than Stanford. Miami still has Pittsburgh remaining on the schedule. NC State's defense isn't very good, but their offense is very good, can give you problems. We're going to need Akeem Mesidor back for the stretch run for this team. And Cristobal said that Mezzi was very close on Saturday. We thought it was there and it wasn't. It's hard to predict, he says. Those things go back and forth, probable, questionable. Cristobal said, and, ultimately, Mesidor did get some warm-ups in, but they decided not to play him in the game. But the fact that he was close gives you some hope that Mesidor is going to be available later on. But Miami does have depth on the defensive line. We were able to get some really positive reps from Armando Blunt, who had a sack in the game. Marquise Lightfoot has played really well. Of course, you still have Ruben Bain creating pressure after pressure after pressure, but that defensive line is at its best when both Bain and Mesidor are out there, because you can't double team both guys. You can only pick your poison on that one. So hopefully Mesidor does come back. But something every Miami fan wants to know, and I'll play the audio for you here. This is courtesy of Odyssey, the Joe Rose Show, weekday mornings on WQAM 104.3. Joe is a very good friend of mine. I go on his shows sometimes. I guest host his shows sometimes. And Joe asked Mario Cristobal about the offensive approach and how the game plans change from week to week. Check this out.
Everybody knows a couple things about Mario Cristobal. You love to be physical. You understand the importance of a strong D-line and offensive line. How much do you change game plans off of that? Because everybody knows, listen, we're playing the Miami Hurricanes, love to run between the tackles. How much do you guys talk about that? Or is it like, that's what we do, you better adjust, we'll do things off of it, but that's going to be part of our DNA?
Well, I mean, our DNA is always to be extremely physical, but physicality comes in different forms. We're physical on the perimeter, we're physical up front. But we never allow anything to get in the way of what you want, the process and the outcome that you want it to lead to. So at the end of the day, defensively, you got to get stops, right? And offensively, you got to score points. So for us, it's the simplicity. If it's in 4 or 5 wides, that's what we're going to do. If it's running between the tackles in condensed formation, that's what we're going to do. If it's in the form of play action, RPO, whatever it may be, we've been very adaptable. And over the past couple of years, albeit a couple of games, have been really good offensively. And you don't ever change the aspect of physicality, but in terms of what you do schematically, I mean, we do it in every way, shape, and form. And I think we've proven that, and certainly sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not a matter of have to do this or have to do that. We have to do what's best for the team and what scores the most points.
Yeah, I mean, I think I speak for every Miami fan that we all want to see more wrinkles and more variety. And I think that was really made apparent in the Louisville game, if not in the first half of the Stanford game as well. Now, keeping in mind, I mean, in the Louisville game, despite how, vanilla and predictable Miami's offense had been, they still could have won that game if they had thrown 1 less interception, maybe had 2 or 3 less penalties in the game. So, I get it. Miami's identity is to out-physical the opponent, out-execute the opponent, but you can complement that, I think, with more variety of what you're running offensively. But I'll defend the staff a little bit because I try not to look at this stuff two-dimensionally, right? I mean, people can either blame, hey, player XYZ dropped the pass, threw an interception, didn't execute, or this play calling sucks, we're not putting these guys in position to win. It's usually a combination of both. Execution of the plays that are called is just as important than the play calls themselves. Both of these things matter. I do believe that the play calling over the past 2 games has been affected by concerns over turnovers from your quarterback and over Beck's confidence. Carson Beck has been very streaky this year. I think we just have to accept that. He's been on hot streaks. He's been on cold streaks. We need another hot streak to start, and hopefully the fact that he, conservative from him, didn't take a lot of deep shots in the Stanford game, but didn't turn the football over. Miami found some success. Hopefully that gives him that confidence to move forward, because he probably lost a lot of his confidence in the Louisville game. I don't think he has quite the short memory of some of the other quarterbacks that have played here, but hopefully he's shaken that off by now. Having more options in the passing game and not just relying on Malachi Toney and CJ Daniels is going to help. That's why I was really happy to see Tony Johnson have a big game and Josh Moore step up in the receiving game as well, because, the plays that you're calling are going to look a lot better when you have more receivers to throw the football to and step up. I also thought in the running game, when Miami started running more from wide sets rather than strictly the condensed sets, I do think it opened things up a little bit more between the tackles. When you talk about offensive wrinkles, at times over the last couple of games, we're seeing more creative wrinkles to get Malachi Toney the football in different ways. That should continue. Malachi's only getting better and more confident week to week. I'm okay if he becomes a bigger part of the offense. And I know I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth because I do want to see more different receivers step up and make plays, but I also want to see more from Malachi Toney. I believe both of those things must happen here. And I liked a play Miami called in the red zone. I think it was on a third down where we put Mark Fletcher in motion and threw him the ball for a first down. More stuff like that. So hopefully the wrinkles and the creativity continues to build because, Miami's going to face some tough opponents. And if you do get to the postseason, if you get to an ACC championship game, you're probably going to be against a really good, successful Georgia Tech team. If you get to the college football playoff, the competition is going to increase tenfold. So you can't strictly out-physical and out-muscle every opponent if you're going up against an Oregon or an Ohio State or an Alabama in a college football playoff. You need to have that complementary football from the scheme and the execution. Both of those things have to be clicking on all cylinders, and the quarterback play has to be high when you get into those spots. But I want to talk about, when we come back, additional playmakers who are stepping up for Miami. I also want to talk about some recruiting opportunities that are going to come up here. We all know what happened last night. Brian Kelly fired by LSU. Another mega coaching job comes open, right? Florida, Penn State, LSU, biggest jobs open right now. There are other jobs open. More big jobs might come open before the season is over. What does that mean for recruiting for Mario Cristobal? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, the Game Time app is the only place where I buy tickets. College football is the best. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself, with endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. I use Game Time to get tickets for my family. I took my son to the Stanford game. He had a blast. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. The easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I love how you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And folks, if you're looking at the next couple of games, if you're going to Dallas to watch Miami play at SMU this week, tickets, it's a big ticket there in Big D, but $100 right now on Game Time, which is better than you're going to find in other places. And that price is probably going to continue to go down later on in the week. Prices for the Syracuse game back at home the following week are starting at $22 right now. Check it out, guys, on the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code Locked On College for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your next listen, make sure to check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I will have a new episode coming up later on tonight, talking about another loaded ACC football weekend. Virginia keeps winning. Georgia Tech keeps winning. SMU did lose, but that, doesn't really make the difference for us because we have the head-to-head coming up with SMU anyway. And Louisville did win again, despite kind of being on the ropes against Boston College, but they pulled it out and won the game. The one that really should have happened, North Carolina was like this close to giving Virginia their first ACC loss, but they went for two in overtime. They went for the win, didn't get it, so Virginia wins in overtime like every freaking week. But enough about them. Let's talk about Miami. Again, I feel very strongly that something that's going to help Miami's play calling, Miami's variety on offense, are more players stepping up. Because, yes, at times this team has been very reliant on Malachi Toney and C.J. Daniels, Mark Fletcher. I would like to see a little bit more Marty Brown moving forward. He's been really good at times. Although I understand, like in the third quarter, sticking with the hot hand of Mark Fletcher, because Fletcher was getting physically stronger as the game went on. Like it got to a point where there was that one drive where it was Fletcher handoff, 12 yards. Fletcher handoff, 17 yards. Fletcher handoff, 11 yards. Fletcher handoff, touchdown. Like he was getting stronger as the game went on. I was also, though, very happy when it comes to getting more playmakers involved. We're seeing Jordan Lyle returning to full rhythm and full fitness, which I think is really big. Lyle, for those wondering, hey, why haven't we seen Jordan Lyle and why hasn't he been a part of the offense? Was injured for over a month early on in the season, picked up an injury in the Notre Dame game, and he's starting to get back now. I think he's back at 100%, but then even once he was back fully healthy, he still wasn't in rhythm, and I think we saw him get an opportunity to get in rhythm, scored a 17-yard touchdown in the game against Stanford this weekend. And, Jordan Lyle, who, let's not forget, I mean, I'm not saying he's better than Fletcher or Brown necessarily. I think Fletcher's the best running back on the team, but Jordan Lyle did begin the season as the starting running back, and he's going to be, I think, an important part of this offense for the final what are we looking at? The final 5 games of the regular season. So I think Jordan Lyle really finding his rhythm again is big. I mentioned Tony Johnson, who had an awesome game, 3 catches for 69 yards. Tony was making guys miss. I think his hard work in practice is now being rewarded with reps in games. If the Hurricanes now have a third guy and possibly a fourth in Joshua Moore, who had 3 catches and had a good game, was a lot more involved in the Stanford game, then that's really going to help Miami's offense, again, not to strictly rely on C.J. Daniels and Malachi Toney. And then, JoJo Trader, he didn't have a catch in the game, but he played 22 snaps. He blocked effectively. And, hey, if you're going to be earning more playing time on a Mario Cristobal coach team, blocking is a great way to do that. That's a great way. Kevin Beard, the wide receivers coach, loves when his guys block effectively. So JoJo Trader might just be earning himself more reps. So he played 22 snaps in the game, had only played 1 snap in the game prior against Louisville. So we might just be getting close to a point where JoJo, starts to affect the offense in the receiving game as well. And then, of course, we still have to wonder, Elijah Lofton, is he going to start having more of an impact as a receiver as the game goes on? So, I mean, not only do we want to see a little bit more variety from the plays that are called, I think it's equally, if not even more important, to have more variety when it comes to the players who are touching the football on offense. And, Miami's offensive line, they really turned things around, started opening running lanes in the second half as well. I know it wasn't the best game for James Brockermeyer at center. He was getting blown up on a few big plays, so hopefully there's an adjustment to be made there. But you can't complain too much about Miami's offensive line. Miami's offensive line has kept a clean pocket for their quarterback on 85.7% of Carson Beck's dropbacks. That is the best in terms of keeping a clean pocket, the best percentage in the country. Miami's offensive line is doing that. So they have consistently been doing their job in pass protection. Not only was Carson not sacked in the Stanford game, he was only pressured 1 time. And I think 29 dropbacks. 1 time he was pressured. So the offensive line has consistently done their job from a protection standpoint. The last few weeks, it's been kind of hit or miss in the run blocking, although we were really happy that the running game bounced back in the form of 199 team rushing yards, because they had been under 100 yards in each of the previous 2 games, which is not acceptable, right? When Cristobal talks about that DNA and that physicality, this rushing attack cannot be held to under 100 yards and expect the offense to be successful. That is not in Miami's DNA. So getting back to that DNA on the ground was really, really important. And, we talked a lot more in yesterday's recap episode about the defense, but you like the way that they responded. Cristobal talked about after the opening drive, Stanford did cut down the field 74 yards. Opening drive was not good for Miami's defense, but after that, the communication got back to where it should be. The gap integrity back to where it should be. And Corey Heatherman, clearly Miami's defensive coordinator, is more than capable of adjusting in games, right? I mean, there was even that in the Louisville game. Miami's defense played good in stretches in the Louisville game. They started the game poorly, finished the game somewhat poorly. They allowed Chris Bell with a couple of big touchdown run after catches, but I mean, Miami's defense did show adjustments in the Louisville game, and they obviously showed adjustments in the Stanford game, because after 74 yards on Stanford's opening drive, they combined for 70 for the rest of the game. More than half of their yards came on the opening drive. Miami held Stanford to -1 yard in the third quarter. Like, that was dominance throughout the stretch run of that game. And again, I know it was against Stanford, but that's impressive against anybody. To give up 70 yards after the opening drive against any offense you play in FBS football and in Power 4 football is impressive, and the Hurricanes did that. Miami provided 20 pressures, 12 quarterback hurries, 4 pass breakups, 2 sacks, 2 takeaways. That was in the form of those 2 interceptions, and 6 tackles for loss in the game, allowing 144 yards of offense. Now, Stanford, in previous games, this is a great stat from Jason, a.k.a. Kane's Chief on X. Stanford, in previous games, they had 321 yards of offense against Virginia, 293 yards of offense against FSU, 353 yards of offense against SMU, that's Miami's upcoming opponent, and Miami held them to 144 total yards of offense. So that's good, and that's encouraging. And we'll take a look forward at the SMU game when we come back, because, listen, despite I know a lot of Miami fans are concerned, like, hey, we didn't look good in the first half against Stanford, lost a game that we should have won against Louisville. SMU, all those former Miami players, former Miami offensive coordinator coaching that team. Are we in for trouble in Dallas this weekend? The odds makers don't think so. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And if you want to get that action, you can wager on Miami at FanDuel. We'll give you the spread in just a second. Now, last weekend, I thought the spread was too big. What do I know, right? Miami was favored by 29.5 points against the Cardinal. When it was 7-7 at halftime, I don't think any of us thought, oh, this team's going to win by 30 plus. Miami did just that. They covered that spread. They won the game by 35 points, 29.5 point spread. No problem, my friends. And guys, there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel. The NBA season is back, by the way. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game, you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Okay, so the Hurricanes are double-digit favorites on the road in Dallas this week, minus 10.5. Miami favored by 10.5 points against the SMU Mustangs. Now, in the case of SMU, they're coming off probably their worst offensive performance of the Rhett Lashley era. They scored 12 points in a 13-12 upset loss against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. And, you know, this didn't happen, it just some terrible coincidence. SMU's offense wasn't just terrible by accident. Obviously, we have a lot of respect for Rhett Lashley. Hell of a coach, hell of an offensive mind. His play calling didn't do them any favors. You know, it's not just Miami who has games where their fans complain about play calling. We're going to talk later this week with Grayson Singleton from Locked On SMU. So the play calling, probably Rhett Lashley's worst in the last couple of years. This was actually the first regular season conference game that SMU has lost in like 3 years. And it was Wake Forest was the team to hand SMU that first conference loss since they were, in the ACC. That team is banged up. They've got a couple of key offensive linemen who are hurt. That really affects the flow of their offense. Their quarterback, Kevin Jennings, he's hobbled and will probably continue to have, a lower body injury into this Miami game. It takes away a lot of what he does from a mobility standpoint, which, if all things were healthy for Jennings, this would be, again, another really tough test for Miami. You face some mobile quarterbacks this year. Tommy Castellanos was running all over us in the fourth quarter, luckily not in the first three quarters. Miami did a good job against Byron Brown, the mobile USF quarterback. Kevin Jennings is capable of doing stuff like that, but he's got a better arm, I think, certainly than Castellanos, so he can still hurt you through the air, but he's been limited on the ground. Chris Johnson, former Miami tailback, he's also been banged up as well. We'll learn more about his status throughout the week, because the former Miami players on that SMU team, Chris Johnson, Romello Brinson playing receiver for them, two former Hurricanes. These guys, I'm sure, would love nothing more than to get in the end zone, score against their former team, and, throw that U upside down like a lot of people like to do. So we don't want to see that happen on Saturday, but they've been banged up. SMU's defensive secondary has really struggled this year. So, again, another opportunity for Carson Beck, Malachi Toney, CJ Daniels, hopefully Tony Johnson again, Josh Moore again, hopefully JoJo Trader. Miami could have some opportunities to exploit SMU in coverage down the field, especially since you figure SMU is going to do what so many previous Miami opponents have done, and that is play with a heavy box, try to take the running game away, dare us to throw. So yeah, I dare Beck. And by the way, again, I don't want to tear down Beck, because I appreciate the way he bounced back in the Stanford game. All I wanted was check down Beck, and that's what he gave to us. He kept the hero ball to a minimum, took what the defense gave to him, was able to find receivers underneath. I want to see that confidence continue, but in this SMU game, you could have opportunities to take some shots downfield, and I hope we take them. So I understand, SMU is not in a good way right now. I also understand that, Miami is the Super Bowl for a lot of opposing teams, and, if there was any look ahead for SMU, you could call the Wake Forest game a trap game. They might have been thinking about Miami already. Miami's probably going to take SMU's best shot. For as bad as the Mustangs looked against Wake Forest on Saturday, I guarantee you they're going to play significantly better against Miami. Luckily, Miami is a deep, strong, big, talented football team, and I think the Hurricanes can weather that storm. But do not expect the SMU that scored 12 points against Wake Forest to be the one that Miami faces this weekend. They're going to give Miami their best shot, but they are banged up. They have weaknesses, and I think these are weaknesses that Miami can exploit. Now, can Miami exploit coaching changes at places like Florida and now LSU? Brian Kelly was fired last night. You lose a couple games at LSU. It's not their standard. They're paying the man a $54 million buyout, which is crazy. Now, something we have to remember, when it comes to players hitting the transfer portal, they just changed the rule earlier this month that the portal does not open immediately after you fire a coach anymore. The portal does not open for them until they've hired their next coach. So, all the players that are currently on the LSU roster, I know Miami fans are like, hey, can we go out and get DJ Pickett? Maybe depending on who they hire, he may decide, hey, this isn't the coach I signed up to play for. I'm going to maybe look at going to Miami where my cousins play. We'll see. But their transfer portal will not be open until they hire their next coach. But when you fire a coach mid-season, it puts your recruiting class in a blender. And I'm sure there's a few of them, but the player that I know Miami is really going to make a significant push for is 5-star defensive lineman Lamar Brown out of Baton Rouge, committed to LSU. In fact, Cannon Pickett, Miami verbal commit for 2026, has already been tweeting at Lamar Brown to come to Miami. He's recruiting Brown, one of the best defensive linemen in the entire class. And so, listen, he might end up sticking with LSU. He is a hometown Baton Rouge guy, but Miami and Texas A&M were two other teams that were right in there in Lamar Brown's recruitment. So believe me, Mike Elko at Texas A&M, Mario Cristobal at Miami, they're going to be smelling that blood in the water, and they are going to go all in for Lamar Brown. Also, I noticed, Hayes Fawcett has been hinting that Miami might be about to land a recruit. I guess my suspicion, if Miami's going to land somebody maybe this week or in the near future, keep your eyes on defensive lineman, former UNLV verbal commitment, recently decommitted from the Rebels, Isaiah Broughton. He just visited Miami over the weekend, was there on campus, and then also at the game, Miami Gardens on Saturday night, saw Miami beat Stanford. 300-plus pound defensive tackle that Miami really, really likes out of Texas. He's also going to be visiting, or at least he's scheduled to visit Houston this coming week. But Miami seems to really be making a move for Isaiah Broughton. So you have to wonder if coming off of that seemed like a successful visit to Miami, if that could be the next guy that the Hurricanes try to sign. But we appreciate everybody making Locked On Canes your first listen. Schedule's going to be a little bit weird this week because Tuesday through Friday, I'm going to be filling in on WQAM radio. I'm going to be filling in for Brendan Tobin from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is like prime Locked On Canes real estate. So maybe some days we'll have an episode that comes out before 10 a.m., maybe some days an episode that comes out in the afternoon. I'll keep you guys updated on social media. Make sure you follow me at Alex Donno on X, and we'll keep you updated on all the show times, and we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.